Is everybody still awake? Good. Okay. Thank you, Richard. Yes, I am with Sprout Solutions, and yes, officially, I am the first, say, top-level person for the HR department. My story with Sprout is in itself a combination of the things, the tools, the behaviors that we see around us now as members of the industry. We specialize in HR and payroll solutions, which bring us into day-to-day contact with HR pain points, payroll pain points, which trickle down. When you talk about HR pain points, they trickle down to every employee's pain point. Number one, on top of that, would be the reason why we get to, maybe not the only reason, but one of the major reasons why we come to work every day is because we know we're going to get compensated. So compensation issues. Another issue that we encounter on a day-to-day basis is how we interact with mandatory government benefits. I hear a resounding yes from that. So I'll tell you more of what that environment is like in Sprout and how we tackle that, not just individually, but as a team in Sprout. Sorry, there. A quick introduction. People Operations is the name of the department that I head in Sprout. For some of you in the software development industry, or for some of you who are into the Silicon Valley environment, you may have come across this term. It was in the business planning, the second quarter business planning this year of Sprout Solutions that I actually brought it up to the table. Can we change my title of Head of Human Resources to People Operations? So, of course, I was asked why, and I will answer that question later on. I'll park that question. I'm an advocate for the agile workplace culture. Kolpak did mention the word agile earlier, but in my presentation, I'd like to delve deeper into what I mean by a very strong point that I feel so enthusiastic about the agile workplace. I'm a mother. By default, that makes me a sounding board, not just to my daughter, but to all members of the family, which translates well into my role. I'm sure for those of you who have been in HR long enough, that's our default role, right? And I'm a full-blooded mountain girl, which means I came to Manila only last year. I'm from up north, not Baguio, but 6 hours away from Baguio. So I'm from Mountain Province, which came as a surprise earlier when I talked to Rebecca and she was able to talk in a similar dialect. The picture you see on that side, that's my team over at Sprout. So a very young team. With it comes advantages. With it comes trade-offs. But this team, for their age, they make up for the energy for things that have to get done in HR. So first things first, who among you are blessed with, at this point in your lives, a kid or child between the ages of 2 to 7? Okay, so I'm sure you've had PTA or bring my mom or bring my dad to school day, right? And the first question usually that is asked is, what does your mom do? What does daddy do? Okay? I was thinking of it, if I were a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old and I'd see my classmate bring their mom, their dad, and the parents would say, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a chef, I'm a pilot. That would instantly visually translate with the children. They'd understand what they do. Which brings me to the next point. My mom's in HR. What would the other 5-year-olds think now? What's that? My mom's in personnel. Another what's that? My mom's admin. Right? So if at that level, there's a certain confusion, why is it a struggle to come up with a quick, defined answer when we describe what HR, what admin, or what people operations is? There's a reason for that. There's definitely a reason for that. In order to get to that reason, I'd like to remind us of some of the areas that we delve in every day as HR practitioners. In 2016, Sprout Solutions rolled out the State of HR report. Now, in that report, it was not done through a survey. It was actually done by deep dive interviews with actual HR practitioners across the industry. So for those of us who are in statistics and research, you know that interviews, that's the most personal you can get when you get to gathering data. Now, the report asked the interviewees, 125 in total, what do you love most versus what you love least about your HR role? Now, you see those numbers up there. Had you been that interviewee, would you have put the same hierarchy? Would you have put learning and development as your first love in the HR role? Would you have put handling complaints, lawsuits, and conduct as the least love of all? Right? This statistics actually also led to another question. What is your biggest HR pain point? The list was a total of 10, but for purposes of discussion, I'd keep it to the top 3. Recruitment, timekeeping, payroll. I read this report. I got a copy of this report before I joined Sprout Solutions. In fact, it was because of this report that I joined Sprout Solutions, that I was really enthusiastic in pursuing joining Sprout Solutions. Because if you look at recruitment as being your top point when you are in HR, then that's, I think, for me, pretty much understandable. Because you're talking about bringing in talent into the organization. And I strongly agree, garbage in, not garbage out. Garbage in, right? But on the last 2 points, when you talk about timekeeping and payroll, ladies and gentlemen, that breaks my heart. Because I did not get into HR or people operations so that I'd spent 8 hours of 5 days a week, of 20 days a month doing timekeeping and payroll and feel that I have a purpose in an organization. I'm not saying, with full respect to payroll people and accounting and finance, full respect. But being in HR, I've seen the toll it takes on payroll masters, on payroll specialists. And this happens to them day in, day out. They don't get a break from it. All right? So, if you take out timekeeping and payroll, which are very easily addressed if you know where to look and what to use, you open yourself up to a better, bigger picture in your role in HR. Am I correct? I see heads nodding. I guess some of you are doing flashbacks to your days in timekeeping and payroll, or maybe it's not even flashbacks, you're having these issues now, right? Another part of the survey, the question was asked, how are you, or how efficient or how effective are you in your current role, right? 7 out of 10 believed that they were efficient. 2 out of 10, efficient enough. But what is more interesting, actually, is I expected to read from that survey that a person being in HR would actually be saying, yes, and this number, 1 out of 10, would not exist. That was my expectation. So out of 125, I asked myself, why is it then that HR practitioners feel that they are not efficient, when in fact they belong to the department that actually is the core of any organization? Right. So with all of that, and a whole lot of data digging, that was one of the many reasons why I proposed that HR, the term HR, be transformed into the term people operations. With full credit to Laszlo Block, if you're familiar, he's with Google, and it's something that I've always brought up in meetings with the founders of Sprout and with management. People ops, because in the industry where I'm in, software development, when you say HR, it's sometimes related to administrative, bureaucratic, paper, or as Kalpak earlier mentioned, something's wrong. Or I'm being called into the principal's office. Or I'm getting fired. Only 2 things could happen if you get called into the HR manager's office. It could be very good, or it could be very, very good otherwise. Okay? So that was what I wanted to change. Case in point, without my heels, I'm actually 4 feet 11 inches and some centimeters. So with my role in people operations, it's difficult to manage or to coach or to administer disciplinary actions when, you're small or petite. Versus if you have that big stature, you're tall enough, you've got a booming voice, which I also do not have, right? It's difficult to gain that authority. Realistically, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you're managing 67% out of 70 plus employees between the ages of 21 to 27. Very, very difficult. They would usually react, that's okay, it's Lai. I have something for you. That's okay, it's Lai. Oh, Lai's speaking, where is she? That happened during a general assembly. I was speaking and I could hear people saying, where is she? Right? So, another thing when we say HR, it's often, it's a sad note, but it's something that I've realized over the years. When you say HR, the initial reaction of every employee is not to open up. It's actually to build that wall or fortify that wall, right? So in somehow redefining the term people operations, you deal with, as mentioned earlier by, if I'm not mistaken, it was Maria, the most important resource of an organization. You deal with the people. And the word operations, when you use the word operations in software engineering, you usually connote it with something that has to be delivered, something moving, which is, although we haven't been labeled that way, HR. We are moving. We just haven't been in the limelight of things. Right. So the question for this event, Are You Ready for the Boardroom? When I was thinking of topics to present, it boiled down to finally sharing, definitely HR was ready for the boardroom. We've been in the boardroom, we just weren't front and center. The boardroom spirit was actually HR spirit, if that would be a descriptive term to it. But what do we bring to the boardroom? Mildred's talk earlier of using business terms and knowing the vocabulary of the organization and the market is what I would term also as your business orientation. We go back. Sprout in itself is HR and payroll. So our clients are HR and payroll people. Understanding them and their pain points makes it easier for me to actually coach and listen to the pain points of Sproutlings. That's what we call our employees. Sproutlings. Rock stars. Yes, we had Sproutlings. Right? So sometimes I get issues from the team. I'm overworked. Like, I've been doing payroll for XYZ for the last 15 hours. There's something wrong with their timekeeping. There are errors. Something has to be done manually. Or another issue, it's tax annualization time. All right? I'm burnt out. I can't deliver. All right? So balancing that coming from an employee and the pain point of the client, I also understand the pain point of the client because I have that pain point. I had that pain point. Okay? Also, when you talk about business orientation, it's also understanding each employee's role in the bigger picture of things. Because sometimes issues come up if an employee feels neglected or feels that they are not part of the bigger picture. The moment they start to question why they come to work every day, that's a trigger for any issues that may worsen or may come up. The next thing that people operations brings to the table, other terms that were mentioned earlier when we say data, right? I go for the term analytics. I like how Kalpak described it earlier, where HR is no longer drama and dance. We can get an events planner for that. Analytics, people operations, HR, admin, we have been sitting on a mound of data ever since companies or organizations started to scale, regardless of what kind of economy. Let's, for discussion's sake, start our reference point from the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, moving forward. I have yet to hear of a comprehensive review or comprehensive report of HR data spanning those many decades in the Philippines. Part of the purpose of analytics is actually predicting, planning. And sad to say, as much as I love this country, that part in the HR role and even with the government offices that we deal with every day is missing. We do not have analytics under DOLE. Enough analytics. SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth. Because if we had that data, we would not be coming into the issues that are very, very strong pain points for HR now. Again, it could be said that maybe at the time that these government agencies were formed, analytics was not really part of the budget or part of the success factor. But now, analytics comes into play very, very importantly. Why? Simple example. every year, you have what you call your recruitment plans, right? Now, if you track that data, recruitment planning, you'd probably be able to say which months of the year are good to hire for certain positions, which months of the year would actually be the months where people are looking to exit. Roughly, make a wild guess, without doing any analytics deep dive. In your professional HR opinion, which month of the year triggers employee exits the most? Depends on the bonus release. Mid-year, there's end of year, then there's also what we call end of year 13-month pay, right? Then there's January non-tax stuff that comes into play, monetized benefits, monetized leaves, right? That data is actually something that people operations can gather and study to address other things rather than recruitment. Example, schedule your training programs within the months where people are actually going through that slump, looking for the next option. Schedule engagement activities. When I talk about engagement, of course, we move away from dance and drama. Engagement activities, round tables, meetups, health talks, female or women empowerment visits. I also would not want to use the word millennial, but to borrow from what media has already highlighted, schedule millennial Gen X collaborations. Proudly Gen X, by the way. Right? Again, if you have enough reliable data and you have people operations or HR staff or HR rock stars who know what to do with that data, you not only buy or you not only get your seat in the boardroom, you secure that seat. Because at the end of the day, boardroom decisions will rely on data, analytics. It's not enough for an HR practitioner to say, oh, Mr. So-and-so is demotivated. The analytics behind that demotivation are the factors, the whys. Why are they demotivated? Right? That's what top-level management usually want to hear. Why? What's the data? What do the numbers say about it? Okay. Lastly, business orientation, analytics, and earlier it was mentioned the emergence of AI. I, for one, would welcome the emergence of AI, but at the end of the day, the human resources role will always need somebody human to execute it. In one story that comes to mind was my entry into the human resources role. With full respect to those who have entered this role by gaining a degree in behavioral sciences or psychology. Full respect to you. But I started out in the role, I am not a psychology major. I did not study behavioral science. I grew up, though, in a family of teachers. I am the eldest, and up north, it's tough living. So we're not even very used to emotions or talking. So I got into the human resources role because the company I worked for at that time, the human resources person resigned because of a difficult pregnancy, and the business director found it very convenient for the budget to change my title. My title at the time was resource officer. The role was doing recruitment. So he told me that day, Lai, we're changing you from resource to human resources. Okay. Exactly. They just added the word human to it. All right. So I said, when can I give you my answer? You have 24 hours to decide. That was very, very convenient for them. At that time, I didn't know if I was ready for it because recruitment was my game. It's numbers. But when you talk about human resources, you bring in a whole, it's a different pizza, right? It's a different ball game. It's a different skill set. It's different competencies. And at the heart of it, you ask, is this what I want? So the human factor of people operations, at least with what we want to do in Sprout Solutions, is something that actually is very, very ingrained with what the Agile methodology is. I'm not so sure if all of or any of you are familiar with what the Agile methodology is. Agile started in software development, again with our friends in Silicon Valley. It was just basically finding a way of doing things better, faster, more collaborative. It trickled down to the human resources field in Europe, Switzerland, the Netherlands, London came to that. But the reason I got into Agile was because at the time, 2 years back, I was recruiting for a software development firm in Clark, and I had to do my headhunting here in Manila. So the way to do that was to join their Agile events. Now, when I looked into the concept of Agile, it's not just limited to software development. It's actually behavior, human behavior. So when you look at Agile HR, which is the term being used now, there are a few sites that have actually sprung up and talk about the topic Agile HR. Sadly, though, none yet for Southeast Asia, not even for the Philippines. Hopefully, because of events like this, we will get to change that, and we will have our own Agile Philippines, Agile HR Philippines thrust. Okay, going back, Agile and how we do people operations in Sprout actually borders on the same thinking supporting Sprout Solutions North Star. And the North Star of Sprout Solutions is basically to make businesses, to make things easier for corporations to do business in the Philippines. Now, it may sound very, very generic, but if you talk about that, if you talk about the North Star, it boils down to making every employee in an organization understand the North Star. And in order to understand the North Star, you have to be agile. You have to push for collaboration, transparency, and delivery. Out of the three, ladies and gentlemen, my favorite concept of agile would actually be collaboration. My version of collaboration would be to challenge Patrick somewhere in the hallway and tell him, Patrick, that policy we have on this certain issue, I don't think that's working. And Patrick would say, no, I think it's working, right? Then and there, wherever that conversation may find us, I bring it up. I stand my ground, he says what he says, and if we butt heads, we'd have to call in a third party to somehow hear us out. More often, that would be Alex. If the three of us butt heads, we call in somebody from the other teams, anybody from the employees. It's sharing fresh perspectives. It's challenging the hierarchy in HR. Gone are the days when HR manager calls the shots for the entire team. Gone are the days when top management dictates the business plan for the entire team. In order for it to be agile, in order for you to keep up with the times, collaboration and buy-in must come from all fronts. And again, I go back to the terms I mentioned earlier, collaboration will always be based on data. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it is a fact, emotions can be masked. We deal with emotions with some of our employees day in, day out, for sure. But data does not lie. Right. Very simple example of that, time in, time out data does not lie, right? My journey with Sprout Solutions in the people operations role is still beginning. And I still feel the same excitement as I felt when I joined them in January. Not because they're at the forefront of things when it comes to payroll, not because they address my headache in timekeeping, not because I know if I am with Sprout Solutions, if I am their HR, I'm not going to be doing timekeeping all the time. My excitement springs from the fact that with Sprout Solutions, my role is actually helping to address your pain points. I'd like to borrow the term earlier when we talk about HR fraternity. Each of us here actually supports each other. Now, when we talk about our pain points and we address those pain points together, we build a stronger collaborative community. And to borrow from Laszlo Black, as much as we are improving and improving on processes, talent, and systems, we still have to get the basics flawless. Because if we do not get the basics right, we will never secure that seat on the table. The basics have to be flawless in order for that seat to be for us and in order for all those other seats to miss us if we are gone. Thank you very much.